Hello, this is David Craig, and I want to welcome you back to Resting in Certainty, the Foundation series. And we're in Module 2, where we're going to be talking about the truth of the human experience and understanding that ultimately, how do we create reality and respond to what we think we see in reality? How does that all get formed and operate? And what challenges does it bring to us when we're trying to live life boundlessly or have a desire to live life boundlessly? So it starts with our own unique journey. And what I want to speak to is what's common for many in this journey. When we come into this world, we're pretty much a blank slate. Now, certainly seems to be a nature that's built in to a new human being, a baby, right out of the womb. We have certain preferences and aversions. We might immediately be seen as somebody that enjoys competition or achieving. Or we may be great observers of the world, or very interested in studying things. Or we may be looking for experiencing life in many different ways, or being dramatic in our expression, or very quiet in our expression. So there are certainly certain natures that are inherent. Yet for the most part, we learned about the world and our place in it based on how we interacted with others, especially our primary caregivers. In short, we grew up in a land of giants and we had to depend on them to get our needs met. Now, our caregivers had various levels of patience and competence as parents to notice and meet our needs. And most every child, therefore, faces some level of trauma around certain needs not being met and how they responded or reacted to that. And certainly the trauma we have experienced in our upbringing has a range to it. It can be very deep and complex when it comes to things like sexual abuse and other abuse. Or there can be less intense traumatic experiences, like when a child is expected to achieve at high levels. And at certain age, it starts very early, and the child isn't allowed to be a kid. So there's all different ranges of this trauma that occurs. However, regardless of the intensities, traumas we face growing up can have long and lasting impact on our happiness and success. In most cases, the trauma we experience in childhood is not attended to because it's not even seen or by our caregivers. They're not aware that what they're doing is causing this trauma. So in many cases, it's not done intentionally. But when it does not heal or integrate, when we do not heal that trauma or deal with it directly, it's akin to experiencing a broken bone that's not being allowed to set properly. When the bone is not set correctly, it heals and grows in an unnatural direction. Just like this, when trauma is not allowed to heal and integrate, we end up walking around continuously compensating in order to feel safe, whole, and to get our needs met. This compensation then becomes part of our strategy in life and in our relationships moving forward. The amazing thing is that when we are resting in our true being and our innocence, if you will, we naturally know how to engage life and find our needs are more easily met, or if they're not met, we are able to come to acceptance more easily and do not take it personally. However, when we are traumatized at some level, we make it harder to access this place, in a real sense, make it harder for ourselves. Over time, we come to believe we are this compensating self, and we take on a set of rules that we believe we must follow to somehow find fulfillment. Or, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we might become one of those rebels who wants to break the rules to meet our needs. Through all of this, we likely did not challenge certain underlying beliefs we formed about ourselves and others. In a sense, we unconsciously accepted certain self-deficiency stories about ourselves as factual. Then we tend to add a lot of emphasis to trying to overcome these behaviors that we formed early on, akin to that broken bone, moving in the right direction and trying to re-break it and set it again. It's a double whammy, really. We try to become a better person and to make many attempts to try to correct behaviors that we recognize did not support us. I relate to this earnestly because I was on the personal development kick for 35 plus years and became exhausted by it because I wasn't looking underneath the surface at the stories that were generating the behaviors. When our attempts do not work to improve ourselves, we then reinforce the belief that there's something inherently wrong with us. We never realize that built into us is a more natural way of being. It's much more simple than we think. So we keep on building on the mess. On top of that, we are bought into the notion that we are this autonomous human being separate from life and others. Most of us tend to look outside ourselves for answers and remedies. And this creates, again, a sense of feeling more and more separate. So in a sense, we perpetuate all of this. The truth is, there is a simple solution, much simpler than you can believe at first. But this solution requires us to rediscover a natural place of rest and confidence. It's already always there. It also requires courage to do the necessary self-examination to melt misidentifications and negative beliefs. So where does this all come from? How do we create our reality? Well, what neuroscience has recently done amazing investigations into how we do this. One of the things it found is that the brain and the way we process things, that 95% of the time we're living on autopilot out of our unconscious mind, which of course is all based on the past. Past successes, past accomplishments, of course our expertise, all that is good, but also on trying to overcome and compensate for traumas we experienced. It has not been completed or corrected, or no solution has been found, and we're still looking, as I mentioned earlier. And that only 5% of the time, neuroscience says, that maybe 5% of the time, we're in a space of now, of conscious choice. Dr. Suzanne Martiz Conde talks about why we do this. She said, we do not have the neuromachinery necessary to experience the world as it is. We cannot sample every simple portion of the world, every little pixel. To do that would need to have a brain the size of a building that would not fit in our head. So let's talk about then the amazingness of human beings and what we do to compensate for not actually seeing reality as it is. First of all, let's boil this down to really simple foundational stuff. There are two primary fields of human experience that we see through. One is story space. And there's three primary objects in story space: people, circumstances or situations we face, and things. So you get up in the morning and there is your spouse or partner. You walk down, the kids, you got the breakfast table, pictures on the wall, your car, and of course the circumstances you face, the meetings, the interaction with your family, the drive to work. These are all the fundamental objects outside of ourselves, outside of our eyes. Then there's inner space, and there are three primary objects in inner space that we experience: thoughts, feelings and emotions, and bodily sensations. Now these two fields combine for our primary experience. Now, going back to Conde's quote, We do not have the neuromechanism to see reality as it is. Our mind machine is primarily there as a meaning maker, as an interpreter of experience. We cannot see reality as it is. We can only interpret the experience. And if you go back to the 95% on autopilot, it makes sense that we have to use previous experience to make sense of current reality. But as we will see, this is a challenging at best way to deal with reality. There's some critical understandings from all of this that are foundational to the work that I do. Number one, understanding that nothing in either story space or inner space has any inherent meaning to it. It's just an object outside of ourselves or an object inside of ourselves that combines in an experience that we have to interpret. It's all interpreted, made up. It is not factual. Number two, every person generates their own unique meaning and perspective. Additionally, most perspectives and beliefs we hold are unconscious, as we saw in the last slide, a couple slides ago. Finally, the meaning we attach to our experience is based on what we talked about earlier around our journey, our nature, which seems to be built into us when we were born, and our past conditioning, which a lot of it early on comes from our primary caregivers. So in essence, what we are doing is we are projecting our reality onto the world. There is no reality out there that is true. We are living from out of our interpretation, or most people are living out of their interpretation, and we don't even know it most of the time. Now, the average person has 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot, right? There is no way that we can take each one of those into account. Yet what we find is there's certain ones that get prioritized in our consciousness, other ones that, doesn't matter. For example, somebody steps in front of you at the grocery store just as you got in line, and you've been waiting in line because it's been a long line up to that point, and an irritation arises of disrespect. In another case, you might be driving home, and somebody gets in, cuts into your lane, and you don't think you don't think about it at all. What happens is our attention over time gets honed. We have this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system, which is the honer or focuser of our attention that gets inhabited, that gets habitualized. And we begin to use the same interpretations over and over again. It makes it easier to live in a certain way. We don't have to think about how to put on our pants in the morning, or how to get to work, or how to cook our favorite meal. It becomes habitualized. But also our interpretations of life also become habitualized. And pointing back to the slide, on the neuroscience slide, 95% of the time it's unconscious, this habit of attention. Now, there are some primary mechanisms there's a primary mechanism that directs our attention, and that is core beliefs. Beliefs are those things that we accept, we believe are true for us, and give us or have great influence on our decision making. So there's a number of different beliefs I want to point to that are problems for us, that cause a lot of problems for us. Number one is identification. And this belief of identification is the core belief that we are this body mind, and the stories that we tell ourselves are indeed factual about who we are. And so we walk around, in a sense, in our little bubbles. One of my teachers, Muji, had a great quote: "There's one Earth and 7.8 billion worlds." There's literally 7.8 people on the planet in their own bubble of interpretation. And And when we walk around, what that causes is a sense of separation from life and from others. And we never challenge that unconscious, and we're operating out of it at least 95% of the time. The second core belief that causes this problem is judging others or life circumstances. And judgments are beliefs we hold about others, or beliefs we hold about others in life circumstances that affect how we react to and experience life. That's good, that's bad, that's evil, that's holy, etc. This dichotomy that we live in. And again, of course, we make decisions around these judgments. What's the utility of them is to make us feel safe. Because the underlying structure of our thinking has trauma built into it that says we are not safe or valid as human beings. Third, there's a specific judgment of judging oneself, which is really usually more intense than how we judge others. And these are beliefs we hold about ourselves and our abilities, influencing how we assess situations and react to them, right? So this is where our anxiety, powerlessness, low self-worth, etc. comes, and again is mostly unconscious. And we may look like a very confident person. And some of the executives I've worked with in the years past in my work as an executive coach portrayed great confidence. But when you spoke to them privately, there was a great doubt in them. It's not unusual because of these self-judgments. And that puts a lid or a wet blanket on everything. And then there's a big one that all of us have, and this comes from judgment about, I can't accept that. I can't accept what's happening. And we tend to react to that by either fight, flight. The fight or fight response shows up. Because we can't accept the reality as it's unfolding because it's a danger to us to accept it in some way. And that causes a lot of dissatisfaction and suffering in life. The inability to accept life as it is. So what do we do about this? How do we compensate for these judgments, this identification, and this lack of acceptance? Well, we create all kinds of coping mechanisms I pointed to in our journeys earlier. Escaping, taking control, hiding from life, please like me, I must win, giving to get. Some of the greatest servants that you see out there are doing it not for selfless reasons, to be quite honest. It's great that they're doing it. I don't think it's a bad thing, but many are doing it to try to gain something for themselves. And that causes suffering. Striving to be unique is one I had to deal with myself, always trying to be special and, have a uniqueness and a specialness to me. Intellectualization. A lot of people that are hiding in their cubicles, right? Or compulsion, various compulsions and rebellion. Perfectionism is another one that runs rampant in the executive chambers, suites in the corporate world. And these are all things that are, again, layering over top in our compensation systems that are unnecessary in the end. But they're beautiful survival mechanisms. When we were younger, in a situation where we feel we needed this, it saved us. The problem is the bone was never set well, and it grew funny, in a sense. And now it's causing us a lot of problems. So what do we do about this? Next up in Module 3, we're going to be talking about waking up to who you really are and how this can be a solution to all this. It seems like a very simple solution, but it's a very powerful one. I look forward to seeing you in the next module. Thanks.